Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 14th Philippine Linguistics Congress. Thank you for joining us on this panel on teaching foreign languages during a pandemic. Last year, we conducted a roundtable discussion on the preparations for remote teaching and learning. We addressed some of the important questions during that time concerning the design of the course, mode of delivery, and communication plans. Our panel members shared their teaching strategies and learning activities as well as the different assessment strategies. After a year of remote teaching and learning, kumusta na kaya? Kumusta na ang mga estudyante at mga foreign language instructors natin? This panel, titled Rising to the Challenge of Teaching Foreign Languages During a Pandemic, will present some case studies and explore the lived experiences of some of the Asian language instructors of the department during the COVID-19 pandemic. The presentations will focus on designing a responsive curriculum for teaching foreign languages during a pandemic, creating and maintaining student engagement in distance learning courses, nurturing language autonomy, and developing oral communication skills online. To discuss these specific issues, we are joined today by our four colleagues in the department, Assistant Professors Farah Kunanan, Ria Rafael, Kyung Min Bae, and Kitsana Kanilao. But before we start the presentations, here's a brief background of the remote teaching and learning setup of our foreign language classes during the last academic year.
The Department of Linguistics currently offers courses in the following Asian languages: Bahasa Indonesia Malaysia, Chinese Mandarin, Japanese, Korean, Persian, also known as Farsi, and Thai. Learning foreign languages is part of our undergrad linguistics curriculum, as we believe that learning languages and cultures different from our own sharpens our attention to the intricacies of language systems, thus developing one's skills for linguistic analysis. We furthermore hope to increase the students' awareness of the importance of both linguistic and cultural diversity through exposure to a variety of knowledge systems. Learning different languages allows our students to gain deeper insights into their own heritage languages and develops their cognitive and communicative skills as well. Many other programs at the University of the Philippines also require students to take foreign language electives to contribute to their undergraduate students' holistic development. We also teach these languages through our extramural classes, where our students are mostly working professionals. Aside from the objective of developing our students' proficiency in foreign Asian languages, these classes also serve as the department's laboratory for testing different pedagogical methods and theories on second language acquisition. Therefore, the members of our department's Asian Languages unit are free to design their courses as long as they are able to fulfill the course objectives and target the set of language skills that have been decided on by the faculty for each course level. This means that an instructor, for example, can try implementing a gamified beginner Japanese course, or try applying a completely flipped classroom model in an intermediate Chinese Mandarin class. This allows us to work towards the secondary goal that is part of our department's mandate since its founding 99 years ago of improving methods for teaching the national languages of Asia. It's important that you understand this reasoning behind the academic freedom that we afford our instructors in designing and developing the courses that they handle as you listen later to some of the methods that the instructors of our department tested in their first year of teaching foreign languages online. We, at the department, were just as caught unawares by the need to shift to online and remote learning models due to the pandemic as everybody else in the world. There had been no prior discussion of developing online language courses or learning modules that students can use to independently learn foreign languages without physical interaction with a teacher and their classmates. There were also several issues that complicated the extremely difficult situation that we found ourselves in. Foremost is, of course, the fact that students and teachers or their family members could get ill. since we are, of course, in the midst of a pandemic. The stress and anxiety caused by the pandemic and the economic downturn also inevitably affected the mental health and dispositions of both students and the faculty. Other conditions that make online and remote learning unideal for our students and colleagues include the unequal access to fast and reliable internet connection. All our instructors reported having students with internet connection problems. There was the lack of gadgets for learning. Some students had to rely on a smartphone, while others had to share a device with siblings or guardians who are also studying and working at home. Some also had gadgets that broke down in the middle of the semester. Another problem that we encountered was the lack of dedicated space for work and learning. There was also the differences in the technical know-how of students and instructors, and of course, there was the occurrence of natural disasters like the typhoon and floods that we experienced toward the end of 2020. The inequality in students' access and the confusion with regards to the implementation of academic policies, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, made it difficult for us to design our courses and to figure out what we can or cannot require from our students to guide and monitor their progress. These issues piled on top of the more commonly encountered issues in foreign language classes, such as learner anxiety in speaking in the target language and students having low motivation for learning. There were also other challenges that we encountered that are unique to the online and remote learning environment. In this panel, we will focus on four of them: the development of a responsive foreign language curriculum during a pandemic, providing instruction on pronunciation and developing students' oral communication skills in the target language, nurturing learner autonomy as they study remotely, and creating and maintaining student engagement in an online and remote learning setup. Our speakers will report on our lived experiences during this past year and the insights that we have gained through these experiences, which will hopefully inform later improvements in our course structure and delivery and in our interactions with our students.
Sorry, Scott, you're on mute.
Okay, for the flow of the discussion, we'll have all the presentations first, and each speaker will be given 10 to 15 minutes to talk about their assigned topics. We'll have the open forum after all the presentations, and you can post all your questions or reactions on the comment section. So for our first speaker, she's an assistant professor of the UP Department of Linguistics, where she teaches linguistics, Japanese, and Chinese Mandarin. She served as a department chair from 2016 to 2018, and she's currently finishing her PhD in Philippine linguistics and writing her dissertation on modality in Philippine languages. To talk more on designing a responsive curriculum for teaching foreign languages during a pandemic, we have Farah Hunanan.
Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon, everyone. So, why a responsive curriculum? So, the idea behind the 21st century skills or 21st century learning is that we live in a fast changing world. No? The world is increasingly becoming more uncertain and more difficult to predict. And that's exactly what happened last year. And so, there is a call to reorganize the curriculum to focus on skills and processes rather than just content and objectives, to discuss cross-cutting issues and themes, and also touch on the emotional domains of our students and learners. Um, Changing instruction to learning, mixing both the theoretical and the practical knowledge, and also the promotion of learning even beyond the school years. So, a responsive curriculum, as Amayao et al. Defines it, addresses the changing needs of students, bridging the gap between the universal knowledge and theories and also their everyday life, which is described as continuously changing. So my objective for this presentation is to share with you the strategies uh, of my colleagues. Me and my colleagues have the strategies of me and my colleagues of how we adopted our classes to become a more responsive environment for the students, for the learners. Okay, so I asked my colleagues to share their insights on how they adopted a responsible curriculum through email interviews and focus group discussions. So the flow of my presentation would be their strategies before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and their motivations for such, and also um, language learning, the relationship between language learning and the pandemic. Next, please. So before the pandemic, we saw our faculty already um, doing this responsive curriculum. So many of us are localizing or contextualizing our material, and some even personalizing the material so the students can relate more to them. So instead of discussing Korean subway, we use the MRT or LRT system. Instead of talking about food that you will eat in a Japanese restaurant or Korean restaurant, we ask them to describe the food that they eat on an everyday situation. Next, please. We also try to locate. We also try to relate the local and target cultures and finding similarities and differences. And especially with Asian languages, these cultural concepts are not really as alien as we first thought they are. So the Japanese has a similar concept, such as our bayanihan, and also the Korean has a similar concept as pakiramdaman. Next, please. Another strategy is looking for the target culture in the local culture again. So this attempts to narrow the distance between the target culture and the local culture. So one of our Chinese instructors would share how the Chinese has influenced our food culture, our local food culture, by showing the pictures on the left. These are very familiar to a lot of us. Some of my students found Japanese characters in the everyday. Can you go to the next slide, please? The next, please. The next one, please. Yeah, thank you. Um, okay, so this shows you. So my students were able to find Japanese text. Can you show my slides, please? Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Sorry for the technical issue. Okay, so my students were able to show the were able to find Japanese characters in the everyday food that they eat or in their school supplies. So we also have been incorporating authentic language samples because we acknowledge that the language we teach inside the classroom is just a part of the target language. And of course, if you use these references and these authentic language samples in classes, it not only exposes these materials not only expose the students to the target culture, the target language, it also motivates them, especially if they like these pop culture. Okay, so during the pandemic, those strategies still continue, no? But the contextualization, there is recontextualization because we entered a different phase in our life. So the changes were reflected in these materials. So showing pictures of people wearing masks, doing remote work, remote learning, and all the stresses related to remote work and learning. Since we're all inside our homes, all over the nation, so you're not in one specific place. You can ask each student to describe where they are currently, and it may be different for each one of them. Um, some of our faculty members integrated pandemic-related content like vocabulary words for quarantine, hand washing, sample sentences that make reference to the COVID-19 pandemic or the situation we're in right now, and also using the situation as topics for conversation, practice, outputs, creative sorry, yeah, outputs, real world outputs, right? Come up with health protocols in the target language. Of course, there are also some who included topics such as things that the students are into right now to divert their attention from the realities, from the harsh realities that we're experiencing, and also reminiscing about what they missed before the lockdowns. Um, some of our faculty members opted to not talk about the negative ones, but pushed for positivity inside the classroom. So they encourage students to make creative outputs like a cooking blog or look forward to the post-pandemic world. So what are the things that they want to do in Japan or Korea or Thailand or Indonesia or Taiwan, China, in case when the time comes that we can travel. And then I think one of the major changes that happened is talking about well-being inside a foreign language classroom. So even faculty members who are not very friendly before the pandemic uh, saw themselves changing into more caring, more sympathetic uh, beings because we all share this. We all share this suffering. So this is one particular activity on relating how we're feeling right now and trying to use the Korean language, target language, to help other students to ease their stress. Although not all activities require students to use the target language, I would like to relate this to the question posted this morning. No, how do we lessen language anxiety of students in these particular activities? Some teachers would ask their students to share anything that they want to share, not necessarily in the target language, as long as they speak. So as long as they speak or they communicate with the teacher. A couple of our faculty members would use kamustahan, like asking each other how they're doing as a class opener. This particular faculty opted for Google Forms to ask students how they're doing because some students may not be comfortable speaking out. This particular activity is part of a study journal. So while the study journal aims to uh, make students track their learning, it also becomes an avenue for the students to talk about how they're feeling. So all these things, I think all of us in the department do not subscribe to monolingual instruction. So we encourage them to use any language that they're comfortable with, especially when we want them to express their opinions, to talk about their own experiences. So here are other examples. Not only from teachers, some students also initiated talking about the pandemic or talking about the situations in their own sharing. So one of our teachers used Discord as a platform. He assigns his students to share something that they learn about the target culture, and that's and it could be any topic. So these two instances show students choosing the topics related to the pandemic or topics related to Asian hate. Some students would also post things that they found online, so not necessarily related to language learning or not necessarily really during the time that they're studying for the class, but it's just some things that they found fascinating that's related to their target language. A couple of our faculty members said that they didn't really change the curriculum. They didn't do anything different. I guess this non-response is also a form of response to the pandemic. Many students started learning language as a diversion or escape from the reality. And perhaps for those teachers, not talking about the pandemic inside the class is also a way to tell students that our lives can go on even if there are even if we're struggling with something. So so maybe the aim here is to avoid conflict and emotional triggers, and also being sensitive to the entire situation because we don't know how our individual learners the circumstances of each of our individual learners. One factor also is asynchronous learning because um, many of these strategies are available during synchronous sessions, but for asynchronous learning, additional work may be too much for some of the students, especially those without the without stable internet or without regular connection. Okay, so what do we see? What relationship do we see between language learning and the pandemic? It seems that worldwide, a lot of people took up language learning when the lockdowns started. So one reason for this is the foreign language programs that we're seeing while staying at home, or because we can travel, so might as well learn the language and experience a part of that culture. Um, but also, language learning again is a way for some of the learners to divert their attention from reality. It's a way for them to escape reality. One of my students who lost her job used this time to build up her skills so that she can find a job. So she can level up her own skills for the next job. We also saw ourselves feeling unproductive, and language learning because the goals are attainable. It's also a way for us to feel positive because we're doing something productive. While some students would say that they always wanted to learn the language but didn't have time for it, but now since everything has moved to online, um, as long as you have the connection, you have the gadgets, you can access a lot of these language learning sites or language learning apps or language learning classes. Um, I would also like to look at language as a form of psychotherapy. So in psychotherapy, they use talk therapy and journaling for us to process our emotions. And one of our faculty members says that what he noticed is that the essays became more heartfelt because the essays became an outlet for the students to share their emotions and experiences. Um, One student said that being provided a space to just share our thoughts and feelings was really nice. Um, One student submitted an essay titled "In the Eye of the Storm." So she used this analogy to describe her own experience being in the calm comfort of her home with her family amid the uh, amid the reality outside. And it was a very long essay and said, sorry, I got carried away. So we really see how language can be used for therapy. Some research also shows that expressing negative emotions in another language does not hurt as much as expressing it in your own language. So in a way, it also helps us. Uh, it helps us release some of the negative emotions that we feel. So going back to the 21st century skills, we have these six C's. But Joe Roll adds another C, actually two other C's. One is choice. So the students are given a choice. And the other one is care. He mentioned a lot of things, and he said that the most important thing is you, the teacher, because they remember you asking them how they're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Farah, for sharing the experiences of our faculty about how they built responsive curriculum during the pandemic. Uh, for our viewers who are just joining us today on this rainy afternoon, thank you very much for joining our first Philippine Linguistics Congress. Please feel free to join the comment section to enter your comments and questions and join the discussion later on during our open forum. We're now going to move on to our second speaker, who will be talking about how we try to create and maintain student engagement in distance learning courses. Our second speaker is Assistant Professor Ria Rafael, um, who, who teaches linguistics and Japanese language and conducts research on the structures and varieties of Philippine languages and on Japanese language education. She earned her MA in Language Education from Ritsumeikan University and is currently finishing her PhD in Philippine linguistics. Welcome, Ma'am Ria.
Thank you, Elsie. Magandang hapon sa ating lahat. Good afternoon to everybody. Again, I am Ria Rafael, and I changed my title a bit. No, the title of my presentation is "From a Distance: Creating and Maintaining Student Engagement." If you are able to recognize the first few words, it means we are of the same generation. No? So one of the issues that troubled me when we shifted to remote learning was monitoring the students. Now, when we were still conducting our classes inside a classroom, it was very easy or manageable for us teachers to tell if our students were actively participating, if they were listening, or if they are part of the activities that we are having in class. Um, we are able to read signs communicated by our students if the content or the activity is too difficult or too simple, too easy, or just right. And then if we are able to recognize these signs, we can easily adjust our classes if we feel that our students are not as engaged as we want them to be. So, however, as mentioned, no, our current situation has made monitoring our students rather complicated. It's difficult to directly observe if our students are engaged in class. So, as a result of several sharing sessions of the faculty of the Department of Linguistics, who teaches foreign languages, I'd like to share with you how we addressed some of how we addressed this issue during the previous academic year. Okay. So my outline is as follows. We'll first discuss or contextualize how we view student engagement, and then I'll present the different types of interaction based on a specific framework. But we won't go into discussing that framework. It will only serve as a guide in distinguishing or identifying the different engagements that we can use in our classes. Um, so next slide, please. So engagement is one of the four lenses that guide design, that guide a good design for distance or online learning, along with visibility, flexibility, clarity. These are all overlapping now. Um, so we can see how important engagement is. But in a US survey, next slide, please. It was done in spring 2020, so last year, um, and the pandemic has already started. Student engagement was ranked as the number one challenge for principals. So the respondents of this survey were principals, teachers, and superintendents. No? So even if this survey was done in the US, I'm sure we all can relate to this. Next slide, please. Thank you. So yung student engagement, now when we think of student engagement, the things, the other words that we relate are participation, involvement, interaction, commitment, motivation, interest, active, and connectivity. And I'm sure you can think of more words. Syempre, in education, no, these are all loaded terminologies, but I use it now here as a common term. Okay. So next slide, please. Thank you. The Glossary of Education Reform defines student engagement as the degree of attention, curiosity, interest, optimism, and passion that uh, that students show when they are learning or being taught, which extends to the level of motivation they have to learn and progress in their education. Okay. So if we engage students, we we enable them, their focus and motivation increases, which enables them to practice higher level critical thinking, and create meaningful learning experiences. On the other hand, low engagement of students results in boredom, alienation, and of course, low achievement can also become a cause of higher dropout rates in class or even in school altogether. So, as a teacher, as an educator, we really strive to engage students in different ways, different methods, no? Because we want them to have a productive and relevant um, experience in our classes. Okay. So, next slide po. Yan. Okay, thank you. Um, so in our initial gathering of data, in our interviews now or sharing with the members of the faculty of the department, I asked them, how do you engage your students, or what are the tools that you use during your synchronous and asynchronous sessions? So here in the slide, in the current slide now, you can see the tools and the activities that they use during their synchronous sessions. Um, so mostly these are applications, no, or websites that supplement the content, either the content of the course or the activities that the teacher provide in class. And in slide number 8, in the next slide, you can see what the faculty use during asynchronous sessions. So medyo madami, no? But of course, it does not always follow na the more activities you give to students, the more engaged they are. So we need to organize these activities into a structure that would benefit the students. Particularly, we should take into consideration the different interactions of the student, which is necessary for effective online learning. So Moore in 1989 recognized three types of interaction. Um, sa kabila, previous slide po. Previous slide muna. Okay, so the three types are learner content interaction, learner teacher interaction, learner interaction. So this is not the framework, no. Many other frameworks are being followed by different or educators. So some of them use yung more of a behavioral, affective, cognitive interaction. Pero I'd like to focus, or I'd like to use Moore's framework. Okay. So we'll discuss the practices, the strategies employed by my colleagues and I, in relation to this types of interaction. Okay, let's proceed. Okay, so the first one is the learner content interaction. So this are the interactions with the content that result in changes in understanding, perceptions, and cognitive structures. So when a student reads a text and engages in an internal dialogue about its content, a student practices guided didactic conversations or student or interaction with the content. The student talks to themselves, no? So in preparation for the first semester of remote learning, we were asked to provide. We provided course packs for our students. It includes a detailed course description, learning outcomes, yung content, activities, especially if they have deadlines, and assessment guides, in the hope that the students would have an idea of how the learning um, would pan out during the semester. And if students have very limited internet connectivity, they have these modules so that they can still enroll and learn. Okay, so yes, next po. Next slide. So to cater to the different types of and needs of students, now we delivered content in different formats. Um, the so different teachers in the department would use videos, PowerPoints, podcasts, and other formats. No, um, some of us made our own videos to explain specific content. Some of us searched the internet and found videos that would help supplement what is already in the course pack. So the expected outcomes were translated into specific can-do statements. So here, on the right side now of your screen, sa bandang baba, you can see a can-do list so that students know what is expected of them. And then after the said module or said content, no, specific grammar pattern, we have a summing up so that they can track their progress on their own. So we use yung simple, lang, very elementary, no, stars, in the hope na it doesn't have to be so formal. Okay. Next slide. Oh, okay. So students were given options. This was mentioned already in the first by Farah Sensei. So in one reading class, in my class, students were responsible to find their own reading material. And aside from that, I provided reading materials, both yung something that pertains to a culture, no, traditional, or something that is of new, find new um ano ba new new content, no, in the language. One class made use of song lyrics o kaya dialogues in movies or dramas as learning materials. And in another class, yung students were tasked to share news that interest them about the country, the learning about the country, um, and they are asked to share yung some words that they encounter, and also describe eureka moments, or moments that they can share that they made some discoveries or they felt that they have progressed in their learning. So it doesn't have to be specific to the grammar or the pattern that was being taught, but some realizations, no, that they were able to connect some previous content with the current experience that they have. Um, so yon. The next slide is about learner-teacher interaction. So this refers to all communications between the teacher and the student that occurs throughout the course. So all of us, we mentioned we were able to use different types of methods from email, chats, cell phones, Vibers, landlines, no, to check on students. Um, so aside from the contact, no, the interaction of the teacher and learner, this can also be seen in the organization or the motivation and the support provided by the teacher to guide the students' learning throughout the course. So next slide po. Next slide. Okay, so in this interaction, it is important to show a strong teacher presence, provide consistency or develop routines, and be open also, no, as teachers to share some parts of your personal life. So, sorry, I copied, cut and pasted some from the course packs. Mga sensei, pasensya na. So here you can show now when can you contact the teacher, um, some notes on the class, on the conduct of the class. And then sa baba, yung next slide pa. Okay, yan. Okay. Hindi. Previews. Okay, sorry. Ayan. And then, you can also provide, or, help students develop routines, no? So, here, the, the teacher gave a sample calendar on how her course requirements fit during the week so that the students can schedule everything else with all the other course requirements that he or she has. Okay. Next slide po. Next slide, please. Okay. So, during this, yung very unpredictable times, yung teacher may provide consistency kasi so some of the teachers nga, you can show how to develop routines. You can reflect on or you can share how you started learning, no? So some of the comments of the teachers during for the learner-teacher interaction, this was also mentioned by Farah Sensei, yung get to know students by asking them how they are, provide tips in studying the target language, and then some teachers start by sharing their own interests related to the target language and explain the extent of the influence of the language that they are learning in the teacher's daily life. So the 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 more the teachers feel that teachers have observed now from the department that the more they open up, the students also open up to them. It is very important to break or lessen the barriers while learning, and since we humans have an innate need to feel connected, it is very important for teachers to facilitate connections. So some of the practices that were shared were the following. Um, So in getting to know the students and asking them how they are, you acknowledge that the difficulties, no, that everyone is facing right now, and not just relay the message that life goes on and we have to learn. So we do we still have to do that, but amidst the current situation. Um, so this were con- this were communicated, no, during online sessions, but of course you can also do this asynchronously, no. Later we'll discuss more of that, but if you can't help lecture during asynchronous session, um, some teachers have advised us have given advice that make sure that you break from lecturing every 7 to 10 minutes kasi yan din lang yung span ng attention ng mga students, no? Pati ikaw. So, during the break, you can use calls or chats to ask students about what they are feeling instead of what they know. So, aside from words, you can use emojis. Actually, you can decide as a class, no, if you have specific emojis that you can use to communicate certain emotions. So there was an anecdote shared by one professor. She mentioned that her class conducts online dinners, no? So as a result, para hindi lang sila kumakain, she invited a colleague, a friend of her, who is a native speaker of the language that she's teaching. And during their online dinners, that friend talked about yung food culture nung language or nung country na inaaral nila. So, going back, no, to when you ask, this was also mentioned by Farah, when you ask students about when you ask questions about students, the other members of the class get to know them too, no? Which means that you are able to break another layer of barrier. And this would facilitate the third type of interaction, which is the learner-learner interaction. Okay. Next slide, please. So this third type refers to the communication between and among peers with or without the teacher present. So during online sessions, now breakout rooms have been very helpful so that the students can communicate by themselves. The teacher may opt to jump in rooms, especially if there's an activity she or the teacher has to check. But if not, no, they can just you can just call them back to the main room after a specific time. So aside from this synchronous interaction, no, you can also do learner-learner interaction using during asynchronous time using the different apps that have been introduced since last year, no. So andyan yung, I'm sure we all have knowledge about how to use Google Docs, Jamboards, slides, what else? Basta Flipgrid, yan, yung mga ganyan. So this is very, yung learner-learner interaction is very important kasi this leaves an impact to the students, no? We try to create in our classes a community of learners. So if the interaction is only between the teacher and the student, it stops at that level. No, you cannot create a community of learners. So next slide po. Sorry, maulan. Sana hindi na naririnig yung ulan. There should always be collaborative activities that students can do online and offline. No? And if you want students learning from each other, you should provide an avenue for students to share their learning outputs or products. So some of us, aside from our LMS, have class Facebook group, which is very accessible, no? Even to those who are not online every time. So very distinct yung characteristic ng FB group and your LMS. Kasi diba sa LMS, students are go to that page to submit activities to get the content, whereas in Facebook, that can happen, but more in a relaxed mode. Kasi you provide this another avenue so that students can reach you and students can reach each other, no? So I'm just showing here yung Facebook group ko kasi I don't want to use na yung teachers groups without their permissions, although I have stalked them. So aside from this, no, I see posts from students in other classes, in other language classes, that they share their assignments like videos, podcasts as a post, and the teacher, not the teacher has mentioned this that for the students, this type of activity is very fruitful because they can demonstrate what they learned, and somehow no, they can check then if their learning is too slow, that they can, if they can add or put more effort, and also if they feel that they are advanced, they can reach out to their classmates and offer assistance. And so in my classes, we were able to interact with another group of learners, and they introduce themselves using Flipgrid. So you don't have to do this synchronously. You can leave your videos, and then it's very easy to comment, no, using this app. Um, so in some classes, next slide, please. In some classes, my colleagues assigned learning partners or groups at the start of the class, no, which hopefully, which is seen as a great support, or will serve as a support for each other. If in case no, the students are some students drop out of the course, no, or from the group, no, they can be put in another group if they don't have their own, if their own group does not, if she doesn't have members of the group already, no, and assign learning partners or groups. And also, sorry, students have their, and in some classes, no, professors have shared that his students have their own group chat without them. So that's okay, diba? We don't have to monitor each one teacher has, aside from assigning groups, no, she has assigned a beadle, prime representative of the class, so that if they have communications within the group chat without her, she can always communicate if there are things that need her attention. So, yon, no? Ano ba? Okay, so sorry. To summarize, no, we need to create a lot of opportunities that capture the students' attention and emotions as well. Connection is central today, and we should make everybody feel in our class that we are not just people on the screen, no? Parang yun na, hindi lang yun yung personality natin. So, it's very important for us to check in with each other, no? Not just the knowledge that we are expecting them to acquire in our classes, but mainly yung presence ng students, no? So, yeah, okay. And so I finished this presentation dun sa dulo with a note, with a quote from a podcast, no? So, to increase student engagement and ownership of learning, we should give students opportunities to do meaningful work. Yung work that makes a difference locally, nationally, and globally. Yon. Maraming salamat, at sana hindi masyadong rinig yung ulan.
Okay, thank you, Ria, for sharing your insights and experiences, why it's important to engage students and how to engage students online or offline using different methods and strategies. We'll talk more about student engagement later. For now, we move on to our third topic. Our speaker is an assistant professorial fellow at the UP Department of Linguistics, where she has been teaching since 2010. She obtained her PhD in language education at the UP College of Education in 2020. She is passionate about training future generations of the Filipino KFL teachers and also translating Korean literature into English. To talk more about or to talk more on nurturing language learner autonomy, we have Dr. Kyung Min Bae.
Thank you, Isko. Following Farah and Ria's presentation, my presentation is entitled Nurturing Language Learner Autonomy, especially in remote learning environments. So I think some notions or some ideas might overlap, but this time we will see how teachers really experienced in holding the virtual classes in unprecedented remote learning environment. So next, please. So just to briefly share why I became interested in this particular topic, I was once just like many teachers right now, we are going through a very different mode of teaching, right? But one time, 2 semesters ago, I was once quite struck by looking at this blank Zoom screen, and then I was feeling that whether I was detached from this virtual space, or my students are also detached from this learning space, because as students don't show their physical faces, I couldn't really feel their emotion, and I couldn't really see how, or if ever, they are really learning the language. And even if we were trying so many different things, and it was also my first time to fully teach in a remote learning setting, I think the first semester was really a struggle, because we couldn't really feel we were in the same space. So it was my personal experience that I became interested how we teachers can really help students learn, and they will really be curious about learning. So this is some short background why I chose this topic. So next, please. Before we talk about our colleagues' insights, and we summarize some important concepts, I will just briefly also introduce how other notable scholars defined learner autonomy. So we know how to understand this, and then in reality how it was really applied or practiced by Filipino teachers in the tertiary level. So as you see in the slide, Holek 1981 defined learner autonomy is the ability to take charge of one's own learning. So we can see responsibility of learners is emphasized here. And then Benson is who extensively studied learner autonomy, and he defined it is a capacity to control important aspects of one's language learning in order to take initiatives and monitor progress and evaluate individual learning outcomes. So in this definition, the crucial keywords are monitor and progress and evaluate. So next one. Yeah, so here we can also see other definitions by Little 1991, quite similar, but you can see how we can really help students develop learner autonomy is uh, we help learners be capable of planning and monitoring and evaluating their own learning through the process. So it's important to remember that learner autonomy is not really just cognitive domains, but it also covers social interactive phenomenon. So later on, when you hear some insights from our colleagues, you will also see how affective aspects also played a major role in dealing with students in this particular time. Next, please. So, lastly, I also saw some aspects presented by Sinclair 2000, because out of 13 aspects of learner autonomy he presented, I found three are quite relevant to our situation. So the first one is learner autonomy involves a willingness on the part of the learner to take responsibility for their own learning. So, as Holek mentioned, responsibility, here we can also once again see students' willingness is playing a major role in developing learner autonomy. And then second is learner autonomy doesn't really simply mean a matter of placing learners in situations where they have to be independent, but this is quite tricky in reality, because eventually we want our learners be very independent and self-leading and self-regulated, but we also have to distinguish. It's not really that we ask students to be thrown away or to find out their own solutions without guiding or without any facilitation. And then the last one is developing learner autonomy requires conscious awareness of the learning process. So here we can also see how some reflective process was designed by some teachers. So let's move to the next. Yeah, so these are 5 questions we asked our department colleagues. So maybe throughout my part, you can also think of your own answers, so you can compare and contrast with the insights shared by our colleagues. So mainly we just ask how they really guide and how they really try to implement the autonomous learning, even if we didn't really give the colleagues the definition of learner autonomy or other scholarly notions of learner autonomy. We ask them how they really facilitate the learning in the remote learning situation. So these are a bit short questions. So let's see from the first question. So next slide, please. So first of all, we just try to identify what are the motivations of our students who are taking Asian languages in our department. So you can see many of them said it's just purely their personal interest, like hobbies, or many of them, especially Korean and Japanese learners, want to consume culture contents like J-pop or K-pop or any other variety shows, so that many of them target their proficiency to reach that they can watch the cultural contents without subtitles. So this is showing their intrinsic motivations, because it really comes out of their personal interest. And then they also, some of them also have a desire to talk to friends or relatives who are in living in a target language country. But some also expressed that taking a foreign language is a kind of escape from the limitations they experience from the lockdown. So taking rather casual or maybe a bit lighter than their heavy major subject is giving them a sense of relief and some fun part of their unchanging lockdown life. But of course, we also identified some students just take the classes because they are required or they just have to graduate. So in this case, we can assume that it's harder than students with the personal interest to gauge their learning and to facilitate how they really immerse in learning. So next. So since we are just looking at this particular current situation, we also thought of the problems that our teachers observed. The first thing is many teachers felt that students these days are a bit spoon-fed, and so gaining a bigger responsibility for them seems not very feasible. So obviously students are relying on the teachers and materials or modules, but at the same time these students are not accustomed to modular distance learning. So obviously they rely on the synchronous classes, but we know that because of Wi-Fi problems or technical problems, synchronous classes are not always recommended for all the institutions and for all the students. So these problems just have some chain reactions, and these are some problems we have to bear in mind, because we don't know yet how this remote learning will continue. Giving this background, I asked how teachers really see the value of learner autonomy, and how teachers can really play an important role in fostering learner autonomy. I got two quotations from two different teachers. The first one said, I realized that classes were just a small part of learning. So in her narratives, we can feel that in a traditional classroom setting, usually maybe some of you might not agree, but usually the classroom, the physical classroom was where most of the learning really takes place, right? Because that's where teacher and students have face-to-face interactions, and their learning outcomes are instantly monitored, and the progress is already always evaluated and checked upon. So we used to teachers used to rely on the classroom settings, but as we moved on to this virtual space, as she mentioned, I think some of us might feel that it was really a small part of learning, but what's more important is how we can give directions, and we introduce different materials and references and ideas so that students can really move forward beyond this virtual space. And another teacher said he emphasized the teacher's role is very essential in developing learner autonomy, because teachers are who can provide the structure and the environment. So this is where students are facilitated and they are guided, because it's not really cognitive domains that we are fostering among students, but it's also how they are thirst, how they are really curious about learning itself. So these two narratives show how we used to how we used to think in a traditional classroom, and then as we transited into the current situation, there are some changes in teachers' thoughts. Next, please. Yeah, so this is also another quote, because uh, many teachers were heavily burdened by teaching itself in the physical classroom settings. But as we are exposed to different problems and different issues that we have to solve, and we have to be prepared in this situation, this teacher mentioned it is more important how we can make students curious enough about the language, not just simply teaching the language. So it's not really knowledge transfer, but it's rather knowledge sharing that teachers can inspire, and they can really encourage students how they can motivate themselves in learning the foreign language. Next, please. Yeah, so this one is also showing some more emphasis and effective aspects to student is important, because uh, as you see here, one teacher said, I also went through that phase because this teacher was once a non-native language student in a foreign country. So she clearly knows how the process is hard and what to expect and what difficulties they will encounter. So this emotional solidarity is very important to be developed among the students and teachers, so that students will not feel left behind, because sometimes they feel like the hierarchy between teacher and students, and they don't really see the teacher as a model to achieve the same level of proficiency or performance in the target language. Next, please. Yeah, so the next question we asked, if so, how they really think students can foster learner autonomy in a remote learning setting. So in this part, we asked teachers some pedagogical strategies they implemented, and based on their experiences, what really worked in their own class. The first one said, the teachers encourage students to continue to use the target language outside the class. It's been done in a traditional classroom settings, but since in a virtual space, we also expect students to be exposed to different medias and some other social networking services where they can really directly experience the language. This is one of the ways that teachers encourage students to experience the languages beyond the textbook. And then many teachers responded that they provide a checklist. So this checklist is showing how students can really self-evaluate, and they can monitor the progress. So they can always go back what they still lack and what they have improved. So as the teacher constantly provide different checklists, but like a weekly basis or quarterly basis. So this one is the proof of their autonomous learning. And also for the teachers, it's also to monitor together the learning of each student. And then individual consultations were very common because as mentioned, synchronous classes are not always provided, and asynchronous classes still need some clarification among students. So beyond the class time, teachers really effortlessly provide consultations for each and every student. And then they also try to facilitate peer learning, because they found out the 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 students among themselves can also help each other. But I think it also depends on the class type, or the how the students are composed in a certain class. So next slide shows two examples shared by our colleagues. That the left one is the portfolio file from one Hapon 10 class. So in this portfolio file, you can see this is the cover page, and then in some pages, the teacher provides that students can really honestly share about their learning. It's not really to demonstrate how much they have learned, but it's rather to share how they really learned, and what they still want to learn, and how they really evaluate themselves throughout the semester. So if you see the below image here, this page is asking students to assess their own hiragana progress. So I mean how they improved in learning hiragana. So here with some cute illustrations, here I can now read and write simple words in hiragana. So students can self-evaluate, right? And then they can go back and they can reflect what they have learned and what they haven't tried. So in other pages, this teacher also made some open-ended questions where students can also share some more emotional aspects of their learning. So how they felt about learning katakana or hiragana or other lessons. So this is not really a compilation of all the uh, 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 learning materials that students can show the proficiency, but it's rather to make students go back to their own learning, because the semester is over and they can reflect and they can critically go through their learning. So in next semester or I'm sorry, next semester or some other time, this experience can really build up their independence and their responsibility, so that this can be a foundation to learn Japanese language for this particular group of students. And then in the right side, you can see a study journal provided by one Korean teacher in our department. She provides this kind of study journal to students different weeks. So this particular journal was for the Hangul, the Korean alphabet lessons. So we can also see here, it's not to assess how much students can really read or write, but it's more of how they really how they were able to grasp and understand the lesson, and how they felt about learning. Both cases, we can see teachers strategically try to approach students, and they try to provide some emotional space, so that students can share what is really going on with their learning. Next slide, please. So next question asked, we just found out teachers' pedagogical strategies, then how the curriculum or materials or even our society can assist to foster learner autonomy. So we have some different answers from different colleagues. First of all, flexible curriculum and individualized learning is important, because even if there are learning competencies and learning outcomes in the fixed uniform syllabus or curriculum, helping students set individualized goals is very important, because after all, how they learn really depends on each student. And then second is encouraging students to accomplish activity sheets or observation sheets. So the second and third response are quite similar. How the curriculum can really allow some rooms for students to have some reflection to achieve the self-monitoring system. And then next one is about the community. So establishing a community of learners or encouraging a collaborative learning among students is very important. And this teacher particularly mentioned family support is important. So learning different subjects, of course, require different support, but learning a foreign language in this pandemic is also particularly challenging, right? Because there's less exposure and less indirect experiences that students can try because of lockdown or because of so many restrictions outside work. So this collaborative learning should be I think more discussed, and how we can really achieve more positive outcomes in our community level. Next slide, please. And then some other colleagues also mentioned that teacher being a good role model is the key. And to achieve this one, we also have to eliminate the barrier between students and teachers, especially when it comes to some psychological or emotional problems students encounter. It should be there should be some kindred spirits in class that they're not left alone, but this is collective learning, and this is where they can really learn together and move forward as a group of learners. Next, please. So lastly, I just additionally mentioned another quote from one colleague, because when we think of learner autonomy, our end goal is really to develop human beings who are pursuing lifelong learning, and this lifelong learning should be sustained throughout the life. So developing this and fostering learner autonomy to achieve this one is really through uh, letting our students be independent learners. But as I earlier mentioned, it's quite tricky how we can really balance to guide and facilitate as a teacher, but we also let our students be fully independent eventually, and they can really find out and they can discover further outside the classroom and beyond the college or beyond their academic requirements. Next, please. So just to summarize, we uh, we we found out learners' active role is very important in the process of learning, but at the same time, teachers' engaging facilitation is also equally important to foster learner autonomy. So, quite similar to some keywords mentioned by Farah and Ria, but I included three keywords here. Responsibility and involvement and reflection should be remembered by students themselves, so that the learner autonomy can really achieve by themselves, and eventually they can really be lifelong learners. Lastly, next please. I just point out some discussion points for all of us. Students should be able to be aware of the goals, and they have to foster ownership, and teachers have to involve them in reflection and cultivate their confidence, and eventually empower them to apply creative learning strategies. So we saw how teachers are really trying their best to design some strategies and come up with good designed syllabus or curriculum. But I think it's also important to observe how students can also develop creative learning strategies. And secondly, flexible learning is important, but we have to point out that doesn't mean self-study is same as autonomous learning, because we have to allow our students experience more and reflect more, so that they can really quest learning for learning in the end. And lastly, we have to consider what is really going on in the Philippine social cultural context, and students' personal environment, so that we can consider those facts in forming curriculum and designing our own classes, so that we can really achieve a conducive learning environment and foster students' autonomous learning at the end. So this is the last page I prepared.
Thank you very much, Mambe. I'm sure our viewers will have a lot of questions regarding this topic on nurturing learner autonomy. But first, we're going to go to our last speaker. Assistant Professor Kretsana Canilao is an assistant professorial fellow at the UP Department of Linguistics, where she has been conducting courses on Thai language and linguistics since 2010. She earned her MA and PhD in linguistics at the Research Institute for Languages and Cultures of Asia at Mahidol University, Thailand. Her research currently focuses on standard Thai tone perception and production of Filipino speakers. This study aims to find standard methods and tools for guiding non-native Thais, i.e., Filipinos, to produce and apply Thai distinctive tones communicatively. Today, Ma'am Poi will be sharing her report on how our faculty members try to develop the oral communication skills of our students online and in a remote learning setup.
Okay,
Hi, Ma'am Poi.
maraming salamat, Elsie, and thanks in advance. Help me share my slides. Okay, สวัสดีค่ะทุกคน Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to share what we discussed before in the group, focus group about Asian languages. Thing that past 2 years already in since the pandemic. We have a lot of stories sharing activities, strategies, the tools we've been experiencing, trying for our language class, teaching and learning. But today, what I'm gonna focus is about oral communication, developing oral communication in remote setup, improving pronunciation, and mastering oral communication skills rarely come to our mind if we are a native speaker. But because as a native speaker, we acquire it naturally since we young. It's with us along the way we've grown up. But if we are the ones like our students who are studying a new language, either second or foreign one, this will be one of the challenging topics for us in both actually face-to-face class or online setup. Right? As we do know that we need to master some other skills, and it's time consuming to bring us to into that point, the point that we feel confident, the point that we feel comfortable to use the language, to communicate, to interact, right, with others, especially the native speaker. As a teacher, one of the language course learning outcomes is at the end of the course, students can use what they have learned or skills they have got from the class, such as the sound system, the word form, word structure, grammatical structure, listening, reading, and writing practicing during the class to communicate in appropriate situation or context. These learning outcomes match with a student's class expectation. At least, of course, as a student, he or she or they hope to be able to use what they've learned, right? Basic vocabulary, everyday life expression, simple clause construction, and so on, to communicate with native speaker in real settings. Pronunciation and oral communication are not the same, but related. Right? They support each other somehow, and we need also listening exercises, a lot of listening exercises to master them. Thus, what I'm going to share today will be focused on our experiences conducting classes remotely, specific to redesign activities, strategies, case studies, and improvement plans in terms of listening, pronunciation, and oral communication. Next slide, please, Essie. Um, okay, so here I got the very classic quote of the many teacher, foreign language teacher or language teacher, no? Or always quote the former president Nelson Mandela. If you talk to a man in a language, he understands that go to his head. If you talk to him in this language, that goes to his heart. I'm not sure in Philippines context it's it's true or not, but this is the right quote for Thai people. Using Thai to communicate both inside outside the country means a lot to us. If you talk to us as Thai people in English, that really go to our headache. Okay, if you know us, you know how we feel. If you talk to us in Thai, that definitely feels our heart. Yeah. As you may know, the language situation in Thailand is different to other countries. We only have Thai as a national language, Thai alone. As we consider other languages, including English, as foreign ones. Talking with Thais in Thai makes us feel comfortable. Conversing, interacting with you. First time you meet a new friend, new Thai friend, the first question they will ask you is, can you guess? Can you speak Thai? Not what's your name or where you from. So first thing we want to know, can you speak Thai? That's very important. Learning a language that does not just give us the codes for communication skills, but also a way of understanding different perspectives, right? And the way different cultures see the world. To win the heart of the native people in terms of language use, we need to know both the codes and social background or context. For me, the codes may include something that if you're not in linguistics, or it's hard to understand. Think about the sound system, about the structure, about the rules, other rules, about the the clause construction, the cohesive devices for text or utterance making, and communicative pronunciation. The codes that we express to words in form of the dialogues or conversations give great support for effective oral communication. Most of our department's language classes, according to my colleague, right, as we talk, do not really put pronunciation practices in the first place. Me also, at the first place in Thai class, I always tell the student in advance that I know what you concern. I know what you are worried about. If they know that Thai has 5 contrastive tones. But we find, we will develop this along the way. As we find with any foreign pronunciations, students have as long as it's communicative. I mean, if you have like you speak Thai, but Filipino accent, that's fine, totally fine for us as long as we understand each other, right? Next slide,ค่ะ. Let's see. So everything fine, but why? Why do we still need to take pronunciation into concern and try to develop oral communication skills? As mentioned earlier, we as a teacher, especially during the pandemic, we conduct the online class. We talk to the student more. So we know that this is one of our students' class expectation. If we put ourselves in their shoes, right? Why we have to enroll this and that language, Japanese, Korean, because we want to really at the end to use some basic skill to really communicate. So students need to master it in order to use it, communicate or interact smoothly with native speakers in real settings. Yeah. The communicative pronunciation is one of the strategies that help students somehow overcome the language gaps and achieve conversational fluency. Um, More than that, it also helps students build confidence that may motivate them to continue using the target language. Once they, I don't know, here, I'm here as a, not tourist, but the one that not Filipinas, I'm Thai. So once I go out and I buy something and I use some Filipino language, and if the seller know what I mean, right? If I want to get what gulay, the veggie, right? They will not understand that I say gulay, like the color, right? So if I can make a communicative um, conversation that make it successful, yeah, we feel good, right? Same thing with our students. It builds the confidence. Oh, I can do this. I can do this. Yeah. So they will move on. They will move on the language. Um, Next slide. What the next slide? Let's see. Oh, this one. So the back to the online setup, right? Online setup. We have difficulties in developing oral communication skills online, right? As at the beginning, our video show the issues that come along. What I put here related to that. So of course, technical difficulties to learn to speak, to listen what native speakers say. Me, I teach you today about the tone, about the uh, consonant sounds, something like that. So you need the gadget. You need the good speaker, the headphone, the earphone, and if your camera is working, it's good. It's great. But as we know, many times it's not. It's not. Many students told us in advance that they cannot make it. They there, but they cannot turn it on. They have problem with the microphone, with the thing. So the thing that they can do, they wait for the Zoom recording to review, to check the whole recording, what happened. So technological challenge. This is, I mean, with me more than the student. Yeah. Actually, this difficulty happen both with teacher and student, right? Um, uh, Physical interaction, reaction, right? In face-to-face class, it's fun, because we see their face, we see their whole body, right? How they react to what we introduce in class. They're surprised, they're happy, they're sad. So we can reach them, approach them right away. What happened? But on the online class, many times we rarely see the student because of the connection problem, the devices. So this is a thing. And in language class, our colleague um, shared this with us. For example, if you study Chinese, Chinese have tone also. If you study Mandarin, 4 tones, right? So to master the tone, we need some kind of body um, interaction, right? The hands movement. My student not only hand but other body part also that help them. Oh, that high, reach that high, that point, the hand will make them raise their voice to that point. But in online setting, we just sit, you know, we only see each other, actually only the face, not even half of the body. This is hard also because to the pronunciation is a thing about the physical exercise, not only the mouth actually, but the whole body that help each other make the lung work well, yeah? And we can produce, express better. Household setting, surrounding, yeah? Things around the house where you live, where we live also, like me with the kids, yeah, same thing. Family tasks, yeah? Some students or their parents get sick, so they have to miss the class to take care of their parents. That happened in my class. And mental health concern, so they have their own issue, right, at home. As us also as a teacher, we have that also. Yeah, so actually, this difficulty is not from the student. Yeah, it's not from the student themselves. It's the environment, it's the things surrounding. Next card. Okay, this is I will share fast. So this is the thing that we've been doing. Okay, me and my colleague. What the methods we use, what the activities, the tools we use, both in face-to-face and remote class setup. In terms of listening, pronunciation, oral communication, right? As a language, foreign language class, of course, we set our class Zoom classroom. Yeah. We use the communicative language teaching approach. That, of course, we put our student or the learner at the center, not us, right? At the center. Uh, this is the method that mainly focus on learning the language through communication. We focus on fluency rather than accuracy. I experienced this on my own. Since I in the US few years ago, and as the Thai people, monosyllabic word, our system. So the way we pronounce the word in other languages, we make it clear. We make it slow word by word. But in English, Western community is not. They need us to make it fast so that they can understand. Yeah. Many times I make it fast. I even didn't understand what I said on my own, But they got what I mean. So means speed, rate is important. Not really, you don't have to say everything clear, right? You don't have to make it clear, but you make it speed rate. Rate in the Philippines, Filipino languages or other languages, different. Code switching. In Thai class, I use Thai English, sometimes Filipino. My Filipino is still continue. So code switch all the time in the class. At least they not feel likeอะไรล่ะ that was this. We talk Thai all the time. They could not understand, but actually, ideally, I should. Yeah, ideally I should talk Thai all the time. But I understand how the student feel. So I do the code switching. Consonant, character, and sound representation. This is past all classes do this. In Thai class, we do the dictation in Thai school we say dictation. In the Philippines, you say spelling test. So we use the word list. They got word list and then they study on that and I pronounce and then they write down Thai script. That's what we do. Some tests on this tone discrimination exercise. So I put the word in the Google Forms, word by word, including phrases, sentences, and let them uh, choose what tone they hear. So this is just a state, no grade. Tone box. This is initiated by Gatling, 1972, long time ago. But it's really work in Thailand. Elsie, next please. In Thailand, we use this box to study the tonal variation. Jessica, next please. Okay, thank you. So we use this box to study tonal variation. You know, it's the magic box for us because not only THAI, Thai dialects, but TAI, Thai language. Languages also under the Thai Kadai language family also use this box to work on the variety of the language. Right? So this is the box. We have 5 tones, right? You see number 1 first, second, third, fourth, and 5. So it's different tones. Different tones. Now how it works, we be fast. This you need to know how to use this box. You need to know 3 factors. This is what my students know. So they need to know consonant classes. We have 3 consonants: high, mid, middle, low. They need to know the vowel. We have short and long that contrast. We have 2 syllable type. We have actually in my class I put open and closed syllable, which is clear, smooth, and check syllable. So 3 factors that will help you know that word have what tone in there, right? Next one, let's see. Here, so from that box, we have the small box, 20 boxes here, and you will see more address, more labels here, right? So if you go, for example, the first line, voice restriction sound. So they will know, oh, what letters, what script, what character belong to this type. Right? In our class, we won't use this box, but we use another box that looks simpler, but it's based on this. So when we put the Thai script here, Thai script here, everything, student will know what tone that word. They know the label, but when they perform, how is it? Right? When they perform, how is it? Actually, I put the voice sound here, but maybe we cannot open it here. So this box help a lot for the student. At least they know what tone should be. Next time. So we have a lot of activity in Thai class. Write them down and read out loud. Right? Next card. Let's see. Okay. So write them down and read out loud. So this is what we did. We annotate in the whiteboard on Zoom. We write. I asked them to write something according to the topic I introduced that session. So the first on your right, that they wrote their names in Thai script. There's my name also there. My class, my Thai friend name also there because we invite her that time. And through this, not only um, the pronunciation that I can check them, that I can give them immediate feedback because after that we read together. Right? We read together. After the notes, I can see how they write, what stroke write on this board, even very small, cannot compare to the board in our hall, right? But they like it. Yeah, this activity, the student like, and it's a thing that we do together in group. Thai, we have a lot. One last one, the final project. We do the big Thai talk. Actually, it's from TikTok. Big Thai talk. I asked them to do what they like, content they like, but you have to speak Thai. You have to converse. If you converse with another friend, have to be in Thai. Yeah, and they feel fun of it. We cannot play the video, right? You see? Okay. Things to consider. Um, next card. Next. Okay. So actually, this one is I just bring it because just want to. This is the next step. If the student really serious, ask me to help them improve the pronunciation. This is what we're gonna do. The like we know we need to know the organs, thing, how it works. Next card. Let's see. Um, I've been using some some IPA. I've been using, but I adapt a little. Okay, I use some vowel chart, the consonant chart, sometimes to connect to compare the Thai phoneme and Filipino phoneme. What you have and what uh, we don't have in Thai system. So that can set in their head, their brain, their mind. Okay, from now on, you have to concern about those sounds. Next one. Okay, speech perception. This one is acoustic phonetic, which is complicated. But speech chain that I bring here, this is the thing that work in the physically, right? Physical that affect our perception, production, and it reach to communication. This is physical. So physical, first, we it's different. It's different to us. It's different. Each person has different speech, how it works. Right? Okay. Next one now. I think this is the last. Um, the strategy, the plan that we plan to make it better or try toอะไรนะ next experiment okay. Is something that I have the idea that okay next round next cycle next sem we will get let the student take a part in our course more communicative language teaching approach, but now we add and learning also should bring in the student. We decide the course with us. One thing I will do, last thing. So tandem, okay, tandem learning project. That one-on-one native speaker, one native speaker and one student, our student, and they help each other master the language. I will do this also in my class next time. But I may do master and apprentice, something like one master, one native Thai, and maybe two or three students who will group under one master. And then our student will help Thai student master English, and Thai will help them master Thai. That's the plan. Okay. Next time. Last one. It's okay to not pronounce it right yet, but we're going to make it together. Maraming salamat.
Okay, so thank you very much, Krupoy. I know that teaching a tonal language is indeed very challenging, especially when you conduct your classes remotely. But it's interesting to know that students themselves use different activities and strategies like listening to podcasts or tandem learning to develop their pronunciation and oral communication skills. And some of these activities are in addition to what we require of our students. A clear example of language learner autonomy. Okay, so let's now move on to our open forum. We received some questions from our viewers on Facebook and YouTube. Okay, maybe we can start with Ma'am Farah. Okay, we have this question from Elmer Palencia Brabande. Maybe in relation to responsive curriculum, what rubrics do you use in assessing students' essays, and do they form part of their grades?
It depends on the class, no? Siguro depende sa level ng class, depende sa content ng class, tsaka objectives din. So for me, if the essay is part of formative assessment, yung hindi pa siya sa final, what I do is just to mark the essay and tell them that this is where, parang ito yung mga mali, give them hints, no? Let's say, check spelling, check subject-verb agreement, check the article you used. So, hindi mo ibibigay hindi ko binibigay yung sagot, but I ask them to revise it based on my comments. Titingnan ko ulit, no? Pagkasama naman siya sa grading, I usually grade the essay based on grammatical pattern use. Halimbawa, sa isang particular lesson, gusto mo ipagamit yung grammatical pattern, so pwedeng yun yung isang part ng rubric. The other would be vocabulary use. So either, again, if it's part of a lesson or kung tama ba yung paggamit ng vocabulary. You can also add content, organization, and it's formal writing, siguro yung punctuation, correct spelling, diba? Pwede mong idagdag sa rubric. I-share ko lang yung may isa kasi kaming colleague na he's very good at designing classes that encourage learner autonomy. So sa kanya, the students would write their targets. Ano yung target mo? Ano yung goals mo for this class or for a particular activity? Pag, let's say, ang target ng estudyante, magamit yung mga vocabulary magamit ang vocabulary sa lesson 4. Magamit ang grammar pattern ng lesson 5. No? Kung medyo mahirap yon, lalo na pag baguhan ng student, we can give it we can show them samples. And then ganun pa rin, no, mamarkahan. So the teacher marks the essays to point out the mistakes, gives it back to the students, and asks the student to assess his or her own work based on the objectives that they set and based on the teacher's comments. Parang hanggang saan yung naabot ko in terms of grammar patterns, in terms of vocabulary. Tapos yung teacher, doon niya ibabase yung grade. Tama ba yung assessment ng estudyante sa sarili niya? Baka masyadong mababa yung binigay niyang assessment sa sarili or baka masyadong mataas yung binigay niyang assessment sa sarili.
All right, thank you very much for that, Ma'am Farah. Ma'am Be, I know you also handled higher Korean language courses. Did you use, how did you assess the students' essays?
Past 2 semesters, I handled the advanced writing classes in Korean, and then uh, our usual process was uh, they they submit the draft based on the learning guide, because as we know, we are all required to give them very detailed guide and some questions, and
Mhm.
what flow they can follow. So based on the guide, they produce their very initial draft, and then I go back to correct, but like many of our colleagues responded in my questions, I didn't give them direct answers either. So I gave them a chance first to revisit what to correct, and then they return it to me. And then in that stage, I give them more feedback on macro structure, so they
Mhm.
can visit the structures and paragraph building. So it goes back to students. So sometimes we exchanged emails so many times, and maybe some students found it quite exhausting, but
Mhm.
eventually maybe it was the process, how they really found out grammatically, or in discourse level, they can really improve somewhat. But of course, sometimes I also give them very minimal corrections directly, like particles or some tenses, such like that.
Okay. I will just ask this follow-up question. I know as language teachers, we can tell whether a student's essay or writing, let's say when a student uses Google Translate, for example, when he writes an essay. I mean, since the context is remote teaching and learning, so wala tayong way, right, para malimit, halimbawa, yung paggamit ng Google Translate. In relation to this question, how do you address that particular issue or problem? Ma'am Farah and Ma'am Bay? Yeah,
Sige.
sorry.
Ako personally,
Mm.
uh, kasi yun yung isang lumalabas lagi na tanong. How do we make sure that students are working on their own work? Ako iniisip ko, realistically, ako as a learner and user of Chinese and Japanese and even English, gumagamit pa rin naman ako ng dictionaries. Nagsa-search pa rin ako sa internet if I'm not sure about the particular structures. Gumagamit din ako ng Google Translate for translation
Mhm.
work. But the most important thing is I go back to the Google Translate, yung output ng translation apps na hindi ko pwedeng kunin lang as is. So yun yung sinasabi ko sa estudyante. It's okay to use these applications, but you have to check if they're really correct and if
Mhm.
they're expressing what you really want to say.
Mhm. Okay, same question, Ma'am Mia.
My answer will be very brief. I straightforwardly say, I know they are using Google Translation, so don't use it. so, so from the beginning, we can eradicate the problem, because we understand, of course, as teachers, it's very tempting, and we want to rely on some technology, but it's too obvious. And then if they keep relying on the like AI generated translation, they believe that's the right language. So
Yeah.
even if they keep committing the same mistakes, it's better they encounter the same mistakes, so eventually they can realize what is really wrong.
Okay. Thank you very much for your insights, Ma'am Farah and Ma'am Mia. Now we move. Yes, Elsie, do you have a question?
Well, actually, we have a question here from a viewer. WP Javier asks, he's curious about the similarities and differences of the challenges and solutions of teaching foreign languages versus teaching other courses during the pandemic.
So, how unique are the discussed challenges and findings to foreign language teaching? So, Ma'am Ria, what do you think? Since you also teach linguistics and Japanese, are there any differences between the two? How you handle these two different types of classes?
Ano ba? So for the languages, when I teach language, I rely more on yung synchronous. I want to have regular synchronous sessions with the students because that's how I view yung connection nga with the students. I want them to interact with each other. I want them to interact with me because from my point of view, that's how they would learn the language. The classroom is a place for them to use the language. Kasi if you go out of the classroom, di ba, you cannot use na the language. Unlike sa linguistics, they can apply it yung concepts, no? They can observe it, they can see it in the news sometimes, in memes, in different interviews, no? There's a very rich materials na for those that they can interact with. Pero with foreign languages, parang confined ka ngayon sa classroom. So inside the classroom, you get to guide them. So eventually, if they go out, kasi marami na namang materials din sa labas, they would know how to use these materials. So, yun. Okay na ba yun? Yeah.
Kaya talaga very challenging yung pagturo ng foreign languages, no? Lalo na kung in a remote setup and online classes because you really need somebody to talk to. Yun yung ano, because that's our pinaka-goal natin, yung pag-develop ng communication. Diba? So, Ma'am Farah also teaches linguistics and Japanese and Chinese. Meron ka bang mga things that you have to consider na sa foreign languages na hindi mo kailangan isipin sa linguistics classes?
Same. No, siguro kung intermediate to advanced level language classes, kaya yung remote, no? Kaya yung asynchronous, lalo na kung writing or reading. Pero kung beginner na you really have to and want to develop their oral communication skills, yung listening skills, parang mahirap na. Kasi pag content course, you can give them feedback. Na, parang nawawala yung interaction, pero pwede mo silang bigyan ng feedback na one-on-one. Pero yun, pag languages, mahirap. Tinanong din namin ito sa mga webinars dati, wala silang masagot. Mga nasa education, hindi rin talaga nila masagot yung challenge ng foreign language learning remotely. Na hindi lang remotely, pero yung wala kang stable na connection.
Okay, so we have this question from Lex Castillo. And yeah, this is for maybe Ma'am Ria and Ma'am Krupoy. Okay, so he asked, is learner content self-learn? That is, the learner learns on his or her own resources available and accessible to him or her. Based on your experiences, how do learners in far-flung communities do this? Ma'am Ria and Ma'am Poy. Yes, yeah, Ma'am Poy.
Let's go one more time. Shorter, one more time. Sorry.
Okay, so Lex Castillo asked, is learner content self-learn? And that is, the learner learns on his or her own resources available and accessible to him or her. Based on your experiences, how do learners in far-flung communities do this? Or did you have students who, let's say, who had problems with internet connection or accessibility? So how did they address these problems?
Last semester, I have two students that has a problem with the internet connection. but they're really good discipline. In our class, we use the application. Okay. So we use Line app to communicate, and all of the students in the group, including the one that have problem online, Zoom. Sometimes they're there, but they have to turn off everything. But I saw that they're there. Um, how can they learn? It's hard if you talk about in terms of the communication, pronunciation. They feel not confident because they rarely practice with us during the synchronous time. But um, what I put in the classroom, and they also consult me. Even student and content, they still need teacher. Yeah, they still need a teacher. Um, I rarely let them do alone. I check. Yeah, I check on them. And it depends on the student also. If they discipline, no problem.
Mm.
Yeah. Because
Maria?
we won't let them alone.
Okay, Maria?
So, yung self content, learner content is not self-learn, no? It's not self-studying
Mm.
directly, no? Kasi yung content is provided by the teacher or by the school, 'di ba? So, if you are in a far-flung area, the your teacher or the school should be committed in supplying or in providing you with the content basic, no? Kung kasi sa panahon ngayon I see yung mga hindi sa languages, no, pero yung sa mga elementary sa islands, no, the teachers go to the island to deliver yung mga modules. So it's not about learning by yourself, no, yung content. Sa content kasi, aside from the things that you have to learn, no, you can always put yung if you are free as a teacher um to organize your content, mas malalagay mo yung boses mo. So kahit mas malayo, kahit less yung interactions nyo in real time, in a way parang naririnig ka ng student. So
Mhm.
if you have students like that, I suggest na yung voice mo as a student, voice mo as a teacher should be heard then or should be read doon sa material. Okay? Halimbawa, no, yung sa ginawa ko kasi may ginawa ako sa sa module natin. Aside from the regular module, I give supplement na explanations na ganito kung paano ako magsalita or kung paano ko siya sasabihin. Para din if we don't communicate regularly, hindi gano'n ka-difficult ma-digest yung content. So, for example, if it's a recurring sentence pattern, I say na I write na, "O naalala niyo yung ganito? Naalala niyo ba? Hindi niyo naalala, balikan niyo yung ganitong lesson natin." So, that's what they read in my content, 'no? So, 'yun.
Sa importante na kahit hindi ka nila naririnig, okay, o nakikita,
Mm.
naririnig nila doon sa pinabasa nilang module, ginagamit nilang module, yung boses mo as the language teacher.
Oo,
Thank you
yun
very
yun
much.
yung ano ko, yun yung goal ko. Hindi ko alam kung naitawid sa mga students. Hopefully, no?
Mhm. Okay. Thank you, Ma'am Ria. Elsie?
So we have another question. This one is directly directed to Krupoy. So the question is, so in relation, because we have students who have difficulties with their internet connection, pronunciation is very hard to develop, right? So in the case of Thai, because it's a tonal language, how were you able to handle this? So how do we handle tone problems, especially when the students are not exposed to the language and native speakers of the language?
Um, as I mentioned in my presentation, at the beginning, I will inform my class that I know it's along the way you master the tone. But my students, they been watching series, a lot of social media out there that they interested, and they are the one who told me, oh, been watching this, listen to those songs. Um, a lot of program they do podcasts, Thai podcasts. They been checking thing out there online that help them. But the thing is, for the tone, yeah, we need to we we need to it better if you have Thai friends. Yeah, if you know native Thai, if you know me, something like that. My student, we have that sometimes they lie, but they use microphone. So we talk. Yeah, we talk. Use mobile app, something like that. Have to be really patient to master the tone along the way.
Visit pagka-open na ulit to, for public sa boarding.
So tonal language is also a problem for Chinese Mandarin. So this is something that we also often talk about, right, Ma'am Farah? So what is your principle when you are teaching pronunciation in Mandarin classes, especially in an online setup?
Before I would really focus on pronunciation exercises, but I feel that the students get frustrated. So it's quite difficult by trying to balance their frustrations and trying to motivate them also to learn the language. So for pronunciation, I usually use songs, and I also introduce the technique shadowing to them. So shadowing is immediately repeating after a native speaker or a target language speaker, just to get the rhythm of the language, of the target language. Kasi minsan, let's say yung tone ng language, even if there are tones per syllable, per word, they also change within the sentence. Diba? Kaya minsan yung paulit-ulit na isa-isa, parang hindi rin ma-appreciate ng mga estudyante kasi nga, pag naririnig naman nila in a sentence, naiiba yun. No? So, I think na-mention ni Elsie sa isang discussion dati na do not memorize the sounds in isolation. But as much as possible, learn them together, learn them in a sentence. Kaya yung exposure talaga to the target language is very important. That's what I experience. That is from my experience learning other languages. Importante talaga yung exposure. Actually, even before the first semester, mga plano na namin na ipapadala yung USB na nandun lahat ng materials in case walang internet connection yung mga estudyante. So, pero nagkataon naman yung set of students somehow nakaka-access pa rin naman kahit papaano ng internet. Pero yun siguro yun nga yung nangyayari sa ating teachers. We have to be resourceful just to reach our students.
Oo, itatry natin lahat ng avenues. So kung walang internet, we try to call on the phone. Kung walang mobile phone, we try to figure out kung merong landline. But then, at the end of the day, kung wala talagang way to communicate directly with the students, we do also have to accept the fact that hindi rin talaga natin ma-address lahat ng mga skills, especially in just one semester, diba? So I think it's also important na aside from yung imparting yung knowledge, yung content, yung grammar rules, yung vocabs, it's also important for us to build yung interest nila, one, dun sa language, and also yung confidence din nila that they can learn the foreign language. It may not yet be immediate, lalo na kasi in this pandemic situation, but once they try it out, in the future, meron pa rin opportunities that might open up for them. So Isko, I think there are still some more questions from our
Yeah.
viewers.
Yes, we have this reaction from Chara English or Kara English. I think it's also useful to motivate learners and appreciate their participation considering the pandemic. Maybe we can ask Ma'am Mia and Ma'am Ria, and maybe we can relate this to student engagement and learner autonomy.
Yeah, I also agree because when students feel they are appreciated and they are really part of this class, and then beyond the class, but in our case, Korean language learning community, I think they really uh, meet the moment that they are empowered because they know other students, especially in the beginners level, are also very struggling as
Mm,
much as they used to do. And they try to show that they passed through all the letters, and finally they somewhat achieved their maybe their targeted or their planned performance level. So in my presentation, we just mainly talked about teacher being a role model, but students being an agent for other students will be also very motivating and inspiring for other students.
Sa case naman ng engagement, student engagement, syempre yung motivation and engagement is um, directly proportional, no? So if students are motivated, talagang mataas din yung engagement nila. The isang challenge though is do you identify yung intrinsic? 'Di ba? Kailangan ba nating malaman 'yon as teachers or do we give extrinsic motivations din para give they build their own routines tapos
mm,
eventually 'di ba magiging intrinsic na yung motivations nila. So yung may isang kwento, no, kasi nga tinitingnan na if you kahit yung students, if they attend synchronous, mas naintindihan nila kahit binasa na nila on their own, mas naintindihan nila yung lesson. So one professor sa department natin, sinabi niya sa klase na you don't have it's okay if you don't ang tawag mo dyan, if you don't recite during synchronous sessions. Sabihan niyo ko if you are able to recite para I can include you sa recitation. Pero if not, it's okay to keep silent. You can listen in. At napansin niya na tumaas yung yung attendance sa synchronous sessions. And eventually, it doesn't have to be verbal tulad ng isang comment. No? It doesn't have to be verbal. Students can communicate kung ano man yung can be participative even by using chats sa Zoom during synchronous sessions.
Okay, so I think that's our last question, no, for our session this afternoon. Before we end, we'd like to take this opportunity to invite everyone to our sessions tomorrow, August 26th. We have two parallel sessions at 10 o'clock in the morning. That's the SIL Lead and Translation Services in Pandemic and Disaster Dialogues, analyzing multivocal experiences of disaster narrated through various media. And at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we have Philippine Lexicography Through the Ages. Elsie?
Right. So we also want to remind our viewers that actually the Department of Linguistics also offers extension programs where we teach short courses that provides training for teachers, including those who teach foreign languages or those who are interested in linguistics or are just generally enthusiastic about languages in general. So please follow our social media accounts and our websites, and we will have more events like this in the future. So thank you very much. So thank you to our speakers and to our moderators and to our viewers for joining us this afternoon. And see you tomorrow.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. Keep safe, everyone.
Salamat!